I think because Texas and Oregon, two powerhouse storied schools, moved to storied conferences and are having success, we kind of forgot that Georgia is still the king of college football. They're smack in the middle of a dynasty. Two out of the last three national championship games. In their last 51 games, the only team they've lost to is the Crimson Tide. And Kirby Smart is still the best coach in the country. The Bulldogs still have the best culture, the best pipeline of developed talent. It's a been there, done that feeling that the Bulldogs possess that no one else does, and frankly, no one else has. They're kind of like the machine that the Saban Crimson Tide teams were. Because of the coach, culture, and players, Georgia is the only team in the country that every week, no matter the opponent, no matter the stage, you're 100% confident in them. Now, what I mean by that is at worst, the worst case outcome for this Bulldogs team would be to lose by 3, would be to lose on a last play. On the biggest stage, Georgia has shows time in, time out, and this year's no different. They win key matchups. And the prime example of that this week, before the Texas game, they were 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in terms of yards ran before contact, rushing yards before contact. Against Texas, one of the best defensive fronts they faced this year, what do the Bulldogs do? Trample them, completely dominate the line of scrimmage from an offensive lens. ETN had holes the size of bikes, horizontal bikes. ETN's vision, the Florida ETN was able to show his head, right? And then on the defensive side, sure, Georgia has had a pretty good defensive line this year. Nothing like we've seen in the past, though. And again, on the biggest stage versus the best offensive line they faced by far, 2 first-round tackles. Kelvin Banks is a top 10 pick. Mykel Williams and Javon Walker utterly dominated. Ewers and Manning were under pressure every other throw. And for the Bulldogs, it's nothing new. Again, been there, done that. These players have been groomed for excellence. The only thing I would be concerned of if I was a UGA fan, and frankly, the only thing that's an Achilles heel is the quarterback position. Oregon has a veteran quarterback going to break the record for college football games started, who's playing really well. Carson Beck, we expected coming into this year, he'd be a top 5 pick, and actually he'd be the reason why the Bulldogs are one of the best teams in the country. Right now, they're winning in spite of him. Carson Beck probably needs to figure it out in order for this team to win another national championship game. And I trust that he can be good enough to do so. That's why they're ranked first. But again, Carson Beck needs to figure things out. Number 2 is the Ducks. Oregon right now is the second best team in the country and the only other team that I firmly expect to at least win a semifinal game. I have trust that they will do so. And the primary reason is Dan Lanning. Other than the fact that we have proof now they beat the Buckeyes, they look a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit more buttoned up than the Longhorns do. Dan Lanning is electric from a recruiting standpoint, from a culture standpoint. See, Sark is a little bit more Mike McDaniel. Lanning's a little bit more Mike Vrabel. When you look at a dogfight, when you look at being in a phone booth, Dan Lanning coach teams are going to more often than not win that game. That's why right now, if Oregon and Texas played tomorrow, I would take the Ducks. And it's why I think Oregon is the only other team in the country that can truly compete with the Bulldogs. As previously mentioned too, Dylan Gabriel isn't only one of the best quarterbacks in the country skill-wise, he's the most experienced. And when you pair that with, I think, the best wide receiver trio in the country of Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, and Trayshawn Holden. Great five-star, four-star offensive line who's experienced now. I don't see how you couldn't rank the Ducks at two, given this compilation of success of talent. Evan Stewart, by the way, was the unsung, untalked about story from that Buckeyes game. Five-star out of high school, coveted transfer, led the team in receiving yards versus the Buckeyes and the Boilermakers. Watch out. Stewart is getting hot. I really love this Ducks team. I think it's Georgia in their own tier, in their own class, because they've built that for themselves. They prove themselves time in and time out. And then I genuinely think Oregon is in another class of their own, as they're kind of a Georgia light with a more experienced quarterback, a better weapon core, and an up and coming type of energy. Oregon, I expect them to win at least one playoff game. I think it'd be a failure if they didn't. I expect them to at least play a very competitive semifinal game and probably be in the national championship game. Or Oregon at two. Buckeyes at three. Buckeyes at three. And I'd put them over Texas for the primary reason of I just think holistically this team is a little more talented. Both are very experienced. I think Ohio State, when you look at the D-line, linebacking core, secondary, right, they have a little bit more in each spot. And there's something about a mad Ryan Day, a pissed off Ryan Day, that frightens me if I'm any other team in the country. Of course, they lost to the Ducks on the road, but look, Oregon is really, really damn good, and that's one of the hardest atmospheres in college football to play in. Not to mention, it was Oregon's first real Big Ten test. You don't think that crowd was going to show up electrified? Ohio State is close to Oregon, make no mistake about it. Like the Bulldogs, and like we'll continue to see on this list, I don't know if I trust the quarterback. I don't know if I trust Will Howard. And that's another reason why I have the Ducks over the Buckeyes, despite the fact that they beat them head to head, is I know what I'm going to get out of my quarterback. If I'm the Buckeyes, I don't. And in fact, we saw it, right? Gabriel leads his team with stellar play to a victory. Will Howard legitimately loses it for his team on a single play where he didn't have awareness of the moment. Buckeyes at three, but they genuinely are great. They genuinely, obviously, are still in the national championship discussion. I think they're going to beat Penn State and beat them pretty handily when they play. Right now, Georgia in its own tier, Oregon in its own tier, and Ohio State and Texas are grouped right there as I would not be shocked at all if they found themselves in the national championship game. Texas at four. And I won't spend too much time here because I genuinely still think it's clear, it's evident why this team is deserving of the fourth ranking on this list. Something I will say though, they have to move off Quinn. And I'm on record loving on him. I'm on record saying he's the big play quarterback of college football. What I think is going on, he was a little more injured than Texas put out there. I think he's still hurt. I think he's short arming throws that he otherwise wouldn't. And it's unfortunate. But Texas doesn't have time to wait. It's time to go to Arch, at least until Quinn is fully 100% ready to play. Something about Arch, too. The mobility is a real thing. It is a big deal, right? When you go up against Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia for the second time, probably in the SEC championship game, the off-script ability, the special moxie with his legs that Arch has, is just a dynamic piece that's so vital. So vital when you're playing other powerhouse teams. But the line of scrimmage stuff, the weapons out wide, the experience on defense, the overall talent on this team. Like I said, I think they're close to the Buckeyes, but I think 4 is a really good ranking for them as of now. The Bulldogs, I'll just say it one more time, are a dynasty team. They're smack in the middle of it. Don't underrate Texas now. Don't overreact because they got beat by the best team in the country. Tennessee at 5, and now begins a new tier of teams. Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, and UGA, I can confidently, firmly see playing in the national championship game. The rest of this list, I have big question marks about, at least one. But the reason why I have Tennessee at 5 over teams like Clemson and Penn State is because this defense is heads and shoulders, I think, the best in college football. Incredibly fast, incredibly physical, incredibly disciplined. I think they have all the right pieces in place. They blend that veteran experience with explosive talent. Love their cover guys outside. They make it look easy. No other defense has looked this good in recent memory against a Kalen DeBoer coach team. This Vols D is sick. And I think defense travels. I think defense in college football still, despite all the explosive offenses, wins championship games. You got to win stops. You got to win the line of scrimmage, stop the run. These are things that the Vols do incredibly well, right? Offensively, I love their commitment to Dylan Sampson. I think Heupel is excellent. I love how he goes fast and he doesn't let the opponent substitute. That's a big deal. The biggest concern for this team and why they're not in that can win a championship discussion to me is because of their quarterback. It's because of their quarterback. And you'll see this come up again on this list. Nico is supremely talented, and you see it every time you watch them play. I mean, just a filthy arm, 6'6", really moves well. But you see he's second guessing. He's still very young. It takes a long time for him to process. A little bit of anxiety there. Now he settled in at the end of that Crimson Tide game, made some beautiful throws, particularly that touchdown to seal it. But until he takes another leap, this Vols team has an official ceiling. And it's too bad because I think this is the best roster, the best coaching staff the Vols have had since I've been born. Since their late 90s, I believe, success. Vols at 5. At 6, Clemson. Yes, Clemson. I think they're better than Miami and Penn State. I do. Look, we saw the Bulldogs go into Austin and win 30-15 against the number 1 ranked team in the country. That week 1 loss doesn't look that bad now. And in fact, if you look at a Clemson team that has severely struggled moving the ball in big games over the last 2 years, the Bulldogs were literally the worst team to begin your season with, especially in the state of Georgia, played in Atlanta. Since that game, this Clemson team looks a lot like the Taj Boyd, Deshaun Watson-led Clemson teams. Routinely over 45 points scored, dominating lesser opponents. And guys, this Clemson team is still all 5-star players. Like, go through that depth chart, particularly on the defensive line, the defensive front. I mean, they're loaded. And I think we see it with quarterbacks, right? We see it with the quarterbacks who are second year with their coaches now after transferring. We see in the transfer era, some of these younger teams get beat by experienced teams. The loyalty that Dabo showed his players and his players showed him by not entering the portal or dipping into the portal to build rosters is going to pay off. And I think it's a primary reason why they're doing so well. But Cade Klubnik now, Garrett Riley now, figuring things out. A lot of talent out wide, especially those two freshmen, especially Wesco. I really like this kid. Brenny Stool at tight end. I think if Clemson played Penn State right now, I think if they played Miami right now, which they will in the ACC championship game, they would beat them. And I think it wouldn't be that close. Clemson is dangerous. I'm going to go a little faster now because there's not as much to say on these next teams. Penn State at 7. Look, hyper athletic, great defense, same type of thing that we've seen for years. A James Franklin coach team will win 10 games. The difference is Andy Kotelnicki, his offensive attack, his multiple scheme is paying off in a massive way. And it's the primary reason why this Penn State team might, emphasis on might, be different than Penn State teams of old. Now, like Tennessee, Aller is a quarterback I still don't trust. Don't look at the stats. Don't be naive. Penn State is that much better from a talent standpoint than teams that they play that any quarterback could do pretty well, especially in this scheme. Now, what I'll say is Drew is better than he was in the last couple of years. And specifically, that game time drive against USC on the road was huge, showed a lot of guts. But he also had a dropped interception. Like he threw it directly to a USC defensive back, and it was dropped. Penn State probably shouldn't have won that game. And Drew is a guy I wouldn't 100% trust. With that being said, Penn State is better than Alabama and Miami because of how talented they are. Miami at 8. And maybe it's a bit low. Maybe I should have had them 7 over Penn State because Cam Ward is the best quarterback in college football. And I don't trust a lot of the quarterbacks on this list. But I also don't trust that, unlike Clemson, their ACC foe, they can't put away significantly worse ACC unranked teams. Like that game at Cal, if Cam Ward wasn't so special, they'd probably lose. At Louisville, they probably lose. What we knew about the Hurricanes coming into this year, light schedule, great quarterback, Cristobal year 3, the culture is there, the players are there. But emphasis on light schedule. Just because they're undefeated doesn't mean they're one of the best teams in the country in terms of we can compete for a championship. Because right now, I don't think they can. But I think they could be in games toe-to-toe with the Giants because of Cam Ward. That's really why I have them ranked at 8. But if you're being honest, what would the Vegas line be if Alabama played Miami? I think the Crimson Tide would be favored. I said it at the start. I don't really care about record as much as I do what I see with my eyes, what I see in the stats. Miami is deserving of this 8th ranking, but it's because of Cam Ward. Alabama at 9. Look, the Crimson Tide, that win against UGA showed what they can be at their best. Kalen DeBoer is still one of the best head coaches in the country. The difference between this Bama team and the Saban teams isn't really the roster. They lose key matchups at the biggest moments more often than not. Those couple of plays per game, the opponent in these big games often make. Now, Milroe is another piece of this where I'm like, sure, at his best, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but can you really trust him? Can you genuinely trust him? He had an incredible half against the Bulldogs at home. But Alabama's year now is kind of starting to look like this was the year where we had one good half and then a really close win against the Bulldogs, a game where it shouldn't have even been that close. And that sucks if you're a Tide fan. But the reason why they're at 9, the reason why they're over Kansas State, they're over Notre Dame, LSU, because if there was such thing as a best of 7 series in college football, Alabama would go to 7 games with the majority of the teams that I've mentioned. And I don't think LSU would. I don't think Kansas State would. I don't think Notre Dame would. Alabama at 9, LSU at 10. Um, I think they're better than Kansas State and Notre Dame. I should mention at this point, there's no world where LSU, Kansas State, or Notre Dame make the semis. I mean, I guess if K-State wins the Big 12 and then wins a home playoff game, but if they're hosting, let's say Alabama, the Crimson Tide probably beat them. LSU at 10, though, Nussmeier has been great. Brian Kelly is a good, reliable coach. I love Lacey. I love the offensive line. Running back room looks good. This is a really good LSU team with some impressive wins. They're at 10. I just don't really trust that defense. I don't really trust them in what's an incredibly tough SEC. But they're a very good team who has potential to win a first round playoff game. I put K-State at 11, Notre Dame at 12. Avery Johnson is sick. If you haven't watched him yet, you should. At least like his top 10 plays, like just look up like a Avery Johnson best plays compilation. He's been phenomenal. Fast, electric. Giddens and Edwards might be the best 1-2 running back punch in college football. I think they're by far the best team in the Big 12. I'd be shocked if they don't win it. And I think right now they would beat Notre Dame head to head. I think Notre Dame, it was a trap game. I get it, the 16-14 loss. But even in these wins, Leonard doesn't look legit. Everything that we knew about them has been true coming into this year. Great defense, veteran roster, a cohesive squad. But Notre Dame isn't, they're not going to be a semifinal team, right? Like I can't really see them beating a Texas. Can't really see them beating an Ohio State, a Tennessee, a Clemson. But they're a good team. And it was close between them and Texas A&M at 12. It definitely was close. Maybe if they played 3 games, Texas A&M would win 2. I don't know. Notre Dame for now at 12.